Welcome back to the channel. I want to show you guys my Icosa account that I've been sharing with you, run some numbers. I think this is really interesting just watching how much yield I am getting in both Icosa and Hedron, and also especially considering that I gave up HEX. I wrapped HEX in an HSI, staked it for 5,555 days, gave that to the Icosa contract for my Icosa that I have staked. It's interesting just to watch over time what the value of Icosa I'm getting in the Icosa contract is in the yield versus what if I just held my HEX. And I think these are some interesting numbers that I want to share with you guys. So this is, of course, app.icosa.pro. And as you can see, when I gave up my HEX, which was 300,000 HEX worth roughly $18,000, when I gave that to this contract using the HSI buyback, which is down here, I got 12,164 Icosa. So far, I have from that Icosa yielded 16,859 Icosa and 746.9 million Hedron. So in total, I've got 29,023 Icosa. And when I looked earlier, it was worth, each Icosa was worth $0.539. So in total, this is worth $15,600. And then, of course, I've got my Hedron here, which is worth roughly $1,000. When I checked, it was a little bit over that. So in total, my principal, Icosa yield, Hedron yield, I've got $16.6 thousand from this pool, in this pool right now. And so first observation, I gave up roughly $18,000 for what is now $16.6 thousand. I'm down $1.4 thousand, right? This is just what is. I'm just stating what is. But if I had held my HEX, so it was staked, right? It was 5,555 days, and for whatever it's worth, I had staked it before this contract launched. I gave up an HSI, an older HSI. So it would be staked. That current HEX is worth a little bit over $7,000. And of course, I would have yield in HEX as well, and you can calculate whatever you think that would be. But pretty confidently, I've actually doubled my value from holding HEX. And I'm not necessarily trying to draw conclusions saying that, oh, the Icosa contract is way better than HEX. That's really not at all what I'm saying. It's like I said, it's an interesting comparison. I gave up some value for some other value. What's over time, how are they looking at this point in time? This is what it looks like. And it's cool to see. I mean, we've got a lot of yield. And I don't see this type of yield happening in the future, but at the same time, that lower yield, that lower inflation on Icosa and Hedron could result in higher price. And we'll see. I mean, the Icosa price has been volatile as the rest of crypto, and it's gone down, and it's been going up recently. So this is what we're at. And wanted to share that with you guys. Another thing. So I went in with roughly 18 grand. Someone else went in with roughly 18 grand into the WAATSA pool. And they told me yesterday what their numbers were. They had 24,500 roughly Icosa from their WAATSAs in yield. And that was actually a little bit better than I had imagined in my head. I hadn't done the calculations, like what were the WAATSAs gaining versus, the dollars in versus the Icosa pool. And, so I'm at 29,000. He's at 24,000, probably 600 or something now or more. But, that was cool to see. And the WAATSA pool is an interesting project. It is slowly over time as people come over to actions and redeem their Icosa, they pull this Icosa out to either sell it or stake it or hold it, they can't get back in. And we've had over 1.5% of the WAATSA pool leave. 1.5 of the total amount of points in the pool have left. And it hasn't really been that long. So in the short period of time recently, there's been some pretty good burns. And so this basically means that the people that are left in the pool for their B points, they're getting more yield for it. And over time, that can only increase. You can only get a larger percentage of the spool as people redeem their Icosa. And anyway, I thought that was interesting. Another thing I wanted to talk about was some people are catching on to the fact that compounding your yield is valuable. So I want to talk about this. So for example, some people are taking their Icosa, whether they buy it off the market or they get it from their Hedron staking pools or whatever, and they are just taking it and staking it in their current Icosa stake. And for some people, this may not be the best play. When you do that, I'll show you. You reset your minimum stake days. And I'll just show you here. So if I added one Icosa, my new minimum stake days would be 270 days. My current's 216. That can be to someone's disadvantage because you can't, I have, for example, 16,859 Icosa. I don't want to wait to 270 days to get that out. I'd rather wait as little as possible to restake. For me at this point, what I'd be looking to do is restaking this Icosa, if not in multiple accounts, at least in another account, so that this one, as fast as possible, right? Because I'm getting yield off of this. I've got this much Icosa eventually, but it's not generating me yield. Why would I force myself to wait longer to make that work for me? And not only that, I'm now waiting for the yield from my other Icosa that I added. So what I would do, say that this is up and I've got 7,946 Icosa. What I would do right now, and obviously to be very, very clear, this is what I would do. I'm not telling you what to do. This is just, everything I say is trying to help people think and consider the best options for them. But what I would do is I would split this up into 180-day accounts, which is, if you go to, I'll show you how to do that. If you go to, one way to do it, if you go to the Icosa contract on Etherscan, it will tell you the max supply. And right now, 1,949 would be the top of a 180-day stake. So that's what I would be doing. If I added another Icosa, it would go up to 270-day minimum stake. So I would max out the 180 and split this up into however many accounts that would be. 180-day accounts, 1,900 roughly Icosa in each account. And that's what I would do. There's some people that are going for 90-day, which is, if you want a 90-day, it would be 194 Icosa. So you could make a ton of accounts if you want. The smaller you go, the more you really want to pay attention to, of course, other things like the Ethereum transaction costs to create a new account, to fund the account, to stake this Icosa, to unstake the Icosa, and then of course the time that it takes to manage these accounts. But some people, like the truth is, if you're just looking at Icosa and the Icosa yield, they do have an advantage if you took out all the other potential costs of like transaction fees. They're going to generate more Icosa for the Icosa they have because they're compounding their yield faster. And, yield, it's sometimes hard to understand how fast compounding the yields can really work for you, especially in a highly inflationary time where we have a lot of yield. And this is just something to think about and consider. For what it's worth, I was listening to someone and talking with them. They didn't understand that if they have new Icosa, they're not at a disadvantage when it comes to total pool ownership by creating a new account. As I understand it, if you added to an existing stake or created a new Icosa stake, if I added 100 Icosa to this or created a new account with 100 Icosa staked in it, I would in total have the same number of stake points. So in total, my pool ownership would be the same. I'm not sacrificing that necessarily by the process. And then of course, another thing just to understand is whenever I create a new stake, it takes into account the current T-share rate, and the T-share rate is going up over time. So by compounding, I am resetting every time I pull out my yield. It resets my stake points when I add back the principal to stake again. And that's another thing I think over time will really matter. Right now, the yield's so high, it's outpacing the increase of the share rate, which I can show you. So here's the share rate over time. One thing worth paying attention to while we're looking at this is, I believe on February 16th, the share rate's going to go from roughly 25,700 to 26,450. A pretty good jump. And, it's going to be to your advantage to stake before that rather than after, right? Just looking at the share rate. So anyway, so this is going up. It's affecting the points in the pool, and it is something over time to pay attention to because, for example, I'm holding my stake points for the 260 remaining days. If I was to create a new account right now with 12,164 Icosa, it would not give me 52.48 M points. But anyway, I don't want to make this too complicated. Those are some thoughts that people are talking about, giving some of my opinions on them and just making sure that you're aware of them as well. One other thing, this is relatively a little bit more extreme. There's two other extreme things. One is people are talking about ending their long Icosa stakes, taking a penalty so that they can make smaller accounts. I would say to be very careful. Let's talk about this. So the way the penalty works, if you end your stake before before your minimum stake days remaining is actually up, you get a penalty. If the way the penalties work is, it just takes the percentage of remaining days left relative the remaining days by the total, and gives you a percentage. So if you were 90% done, you'd have 10% left. It would take the 10% and take 10% of your principal, 10% of all your yield away. Like if I was to end this one, I'm not even halfway done. I would have an over 50% penalty on my staked Icosa and my Icosa yield and my Hedron. And so just be very, very careful. If you decide to end your Icosa stake early, it'll tell you, like, this is what you're getting. This is all your penalties. Just be very, very careful. Consider that. And then another thing is some people are saying, I don't want my Hedron. This Icosa staking pool per dollar in is giving me so much more yield than per dollar in the Hedron staking pool. Why am I holding dollars in Hedron in the Hedron staking pool? Why not sell that Hedron for Icosa, take advantage of this massive yield? And I say, fine, like, understand what you're doing. When you do that, you're taking potential options off the table. There's things you can do with Hedron. It's not just a dollar amount. Like, there's things you can do with Hedron, and maybe the Hedron price is going to rise massively or something like that. And if you're in Icosa, you're going to miss out on that. You're kind of playing one game, and it's fine. That's an explanation people have, as I understand it. They're looking at this pool per dollar in. I get more yield, and I want that yield. It's a competitive time. The yield's not always going to be this high likely, so let's take advantage of it now. make our dollars work for us. They're going that game. And that's just something to think about. And I'm not excited about that. And it's just me and my personal position. I like my Hedron and I like my Icosa. I want to play both games. And I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen. So here's some, let's talk about that more, because the price of Hedron is an interesting topic, I believe. So let's just see where we should start with this. So some thoughts on my mind when it comes to Hedron and why I would want to hold Hedron myself is, one, we are in a bear market. Hedron launched in a bear market. Basically just means bear markets in general, the desire to buy is low. Hedron price may be low just because we're in a bear market relative to whenever the markets turn. It could be low. And to talk about how low the Hedron price is, we can go to hexmodel.com, a very useful site. By the way, I'm interrupting my own talk. If you are considering giving, I get this question a lot, that's why I'm talking about it. If you're considering giving up an HSI to the Icosa contract through the HSI buyback, and you're wondering how much Icosa you're going to get for that HEX, Dev Huey has a good calculator right here. You just put in the number of T shares and the current share rate and just click update. And it'll tell you if it's a 555 stake, you're going to get 479 for a 2T share. And this is not exactly the current T share rate, but that's the idea anyway. Back to the topic. So Hedron price. We are 26 times underneath the theoretical max ARB price for Hedron. And I don't necessarily want to explain what that is, but there's, for example, the Icosa price is down 36.8% right now. And like that's a big difference between the Hedron price and the Icosa price. This has a theoretical maximum price of 26 times higher. And that means something to me. Like I want to be careful missing out on a 26x on my Hedron, for example. And I'm not necessarily expecting a 26x, but that's a very big number. And this is tied to HEX. So if HEX goes up, so if HEX was $1 today, Hedron could rise a lot in price and still be down 26x. It's relative to it follows. In some ways, it follows the HEX price. So if the HEX price goes up, Hedron can still go up and still have a huge high ceiling. And so another reason, it's a bear market. It's way underneath its theoretical ARB ceiling, and it is. What was the other good reason? Oh yeah, we have Hedron bonus multiples of 10x on some big accounts. It basically means that for the HEX that they have staked, they're getting 10 times more Hedron for those stakes. And those stakes are not going to last forever. Over the following year and the years after that, those stakes are going to end, and you can't like renew them or something to keep that 10x multiple. That in itself, aside from the rising T-share rate, is disinflationary. It is slowing the rate at which Hedron is created. And price, of course, is a product of supply and demand. And if the supply of Hedron goes down, demand stays the same, then the price is likely to rise. And we're at a point where we've had a lot of inflation, and we still have inflation for Hedron in a bear market, far down from the ARB ceiling. That is, I just don't want to give that up. I don't want to give that Hedron up for Icosa, even if there's a lot of yield for it. I might think differently if I didn't hold any Icosa, but I already am in both games somewhat equally, and I like where I'm at myself. And so that's some reasons why I'm not exactly extremely all for just going crazy on Icosa. And then on a similar point, I have a feeling that there's a good chance that some of the best plays on buying HEX in a bear market, there's a good chance that it's people that bought HEX through the auctions, which can only be done with Hedron. And, you know, if HEX price, whatever, it's a bear market, I have a feeling that we're going to have a lot of sell pressure, a lot of pressure on down price, whether or not HEX goes down because of that, basically because of things outside of HEX. There's a chance that the markets go lower and HEX may be affected by that. We will see. If I feel like we're getting close, like we've had a huge drop, we've had a little bit of a play out, whatever. And I think this is getting close to the bottom, and I want to buy HEX. I would consider myself using Hedron through these HSIs to buy at that time. If there's still a discount, they've been going at a little bit of a discount. It's not always 1-to-1, the value of HEX versus the value of Hedron bought. So I would consider it. Of course, the downside of buying HSIs, some would consider this a downside, is it's locked 15 years. And maybe the HEX that I want to buy, I don't want to stake for 15 years or something. And that would, you know, disincentivize me or something from buying an HSI. But I want to leave my options open, and I want to play both games myself. And those are some thoughts that I have on that. Speaking of the inflation of Hedron, which is very important to me, one of the reasons I was very excited about the Icosa project is it had a chance of addressing the Hedron inflation. Hedron was a cool idea, lots of potential that's not even being used at this time, like borrowing against your HEX. People aren't doing that because the price of Hedron is so far below the value of the locked HEX that it doesn't really make sense for most people. But, you know, if the Hedron price rises, then we got some really cool potential options that we're not even exercising. So this is Hedron.pro. They have a cool graph here talking about the burn of Hedron versus the mint of Hedron. Are we burning, for example, more Hedron than we are minting? And you can just look at a glance of the last, I believe, 30 days. The blue line is right here. The blue line is the minted. The yellow line, the orange line, is the burnt Hedron. Recently, we've been inflating faster than we're burning. And it's just worth recognizing. For a while, we were burning more than we were minting. And, you know, we are still burning. That's great. We're not inflating at as fast of a rate, but we are still inflating. And this is, in my opinion, important to watch. Like I said, supply and demand. If supply increases and demand remains the same, then the price is probably going to go down. And I think for these projects to sustain, we have to, for example, for Hedron, we need to address how fast inflation of Hedron has been rising. And I would like to not only see the disinflationary nature of the 10x bonus multiples leaving, but I would also, and the T-share rate rising. For new stakes, the amount of Hedron you get is less per HEX. And but I would also like to see the Hedron burn and us bring our total amount of Hedron down. And so far, right now, recently, we're still increasing in Hedron, and it's not bad. It's not like, oh, this now I think the project's going to fail. It just makes it less confident than if we were burning faster than we were minting. Anyway, guys, those are some thoughts from me on the Icosa project. This is my numbers. This is where I'm at. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you in the next one.